what does this last election, because there was so much emphasis on us coming out to vote, you know, for us participating in vote. And some of the stuff, you know, it went well. I mean, if you look at Mississippi, right, just recently, like with Mississippi, it's just kind of the plague of racism continues to hold. I mean, you look at Atlanta, you look at Florida, these different things. Some of those things that didn't go our way, that would make black people say again, well, why should I vote? Look what happens, because voter suppression and all the other things that happen in the midst of us, I say, organizing as well as we did, it still sometimes didn't go our way. So I just want everybody to introduce themselves, and then let's jump on in.
Hey, my name is Joshua. I'm from Sacramento City College, Black Student Union. Out here today representing.
Good evening, my name is Khalil Ferguson, Sac State grad.
Good evening, Omega Brewer, SEIU Local 2015.
Daryl Roberts, co-founder of Roberts Family Development Center.
And Rolanda Wilkins, y'all know me.
Yeah. And thank you again for coming out. And just thank you, Mama Ro, for opening up this platform. Let's give her a big hand, you know what I'm saying? Let's get it in. As, you know, we're going into 2019 with even some more great, you know, things on the platform to have our black voices be heard. So, you know, make sure you guys connect with a friend, share it, let people know that we're in the building, we're going. So let's just jump into it, right? And I'm gonna go hit with my brother Daryl. Measure You. Let's go real quick. Measure You.
Go to Measure You first.
Controversial, a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving pieces, a lot of division in between the black community, and we're going to get some insight from everybody on that. You were definitely one of the organizers to really push the fact that Measure You was a need, a necessity for us moving forward. Now that Measure You passed, and you were at the what was that, with the Daryl? Celebration, right, the You Measure You celebration. Now that's passed, where do we go next? What is black people's next move moving forward, Measure You?
I think the first of all, you have to accept the fact that I was one of many who were supportive of Measure You, including yourself there, and took a lot of heat from people who, some places they didn't really know us. For me, they didn't know me. I was an OG to them, but they, you know, they hadn't been here long enough to recognize, you know, my commitment. But what amazed me was the recognition after the fact that once this election is over, the work begins. And right now, the work is about within your neighborhood, within the organization you're part of, forcing folks to have a discussion about what do we need to see happen in our community, and how do we get some of the resources of Measure You to be focused on our neighborhoods, the places where we live, we work, and we operate. So for me, that becomes District 2, the north area of Sacramento, that becomes CV Circle. And some days that becomes part of South Sacramento. But how do we make sure that we're having conversations with leaders, with residents on what's important, what should be happening? And that's my first step right now, just having that conversation amongst ourselves, whether it be college students, whether it be recent college graduates, whether it be labor leaders, whether it be community-based organizations. What should we be talking about in terms of improving our lifestyle, the neighborhoods that we live? So I recently had a conversation with a couple of seniors where they were talking about, you know, Mr. Roberts, and it's funny when they call me Mr. Roberts, it's the issue that they say, you know, the resources that are needed are the services in our neighborhood that have gone to pot, whether it be the regular park services, whether it be the regular street services, keeping the neighborhood clean, code enforcement, things like that. You don't think that's important, but for a senior who has their last dollar invested in a piece of property that they've been living in for 20, 30 years, they want to make sure that stays quality so that they can benefit down the line as they leave something for their own heirs and their grandkids to have to build on. So for me, it's looking at that as well, talking about what's needed. Quickly, people think about the after-school services and things like that, but I can talk about that at another point. I really will talk about how do we make sure we're talking, we're organizing, and we're talking about what's needed in our neighborhoods.
Refresh us on what Measure You is, so people know what that's really about, so they know how to lean in.
It was the half-cent increase to the 8.25 sales tax. So now, beginning March 19th, March of 2019, sales tax goes to 8.75 cents on a dollar. And that's sales tax, so that's on consumable goods. But more importantly, it represents an increase of about $50 million a year to our general fund. That really is not designated for anything. It gives us the ability to begin talking about what should be happening with that $50 million. I focus on that because the other $50 million of Measure U actually goes to public services, public safety and other things already earmarked for that. But that $50 million that's on the table is open for discussion and advocacy by those of us in our various neighborhoods.
Thank you. So, Prop 10, why did that not pass?
Dun, 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 dun. No,
Okay.
you can tap in right after because Queen works.
So I think it's a couple of reasons. One, I mean, big money was in play. The California Apartment Association, the Realtors Association, coalitions, the various coalitions knew from the beginning that they were going to lodge every cent that they possibly could in defeating this measure. I also think that Prop 10 is a complicated issue, meaning Costa-Hawkins is a complicated issue, and it wasn't clear how to explain that in a concise way. You know, yes, I can say easily it's a loophole for rent control that needs to go away, but I think that, you know, the coalition and the campaign as a whole struggled with that in a way to explain that in a way that makes sense for individual voters, and in a way that combated the millions of dollars in TV ads that we saw every day, talking of, you know, with the dog whistle points, saying that, you know, rent control is bad for veterans and bad for seniors and disabled people and people of color and black people in particular. So I think that, you know, we were outspent, quite frankly, and didn't do the best job of getting that message out.
All right. What you want to add on to it, brother?
To add on to that, of course, we know big money is at play with regards to capitalism and regards to, you know, how the housing market is in California. Who wants to really put a cap on that throughout the state at least? With regards to the economics behind it, Prop 10, in my opinion, would have exacerbated gentrification and would have been detrimental to black folks in neighborhoods where we largely rent. Black folks really don't own much, and we rent a lot of the homes that we live in. To cite some of my opinion, we can cite San Francisco and their rent control and how that has not worked. We can cite how city-owned buildings, not necessarily public housing, but city-owned buildings in SF, in which they kind of created a landlord that wasn't present essentially. They dilapidated living standards, which essentially created slums, and that's government-controlled housing, which kind of set the rent ceiling. That never really worked out. Additionally, in which the opposition to Prop 10 largely cited was the experiment in Berkeley in the 90s, where they tried rent control, and they saw the exacerbated gentrification that led to a lot of people not wanting the government to have a hand in how much they can control their housing market prices, essentially, and then that led to black people or people who are inhabiting those homes getting eviction notices, not because of rent prices going up, because the owners were selling their homes and not really wanting to be homeowners anymore as well. So, in my opinion, rent control by the state essentially was not going to help, because the state has not proven to care for black folks with regards to housing, as well as the market. So, of course, big money was at play with regards to why big Prop 10 did not pass, but additionally, we can go into the economics behind it, and Prop 10 was not beneficial to black folks in general.
Ooh, I love it. I feel the energy's going to shift right here. Let's go.
Oh yeah.
No,
I think we
let's go.
should be having that discussion.
No, let's
to
have
be
the
honest
discussion.
with you, because we do got to do something around. All black people don't see it the same way.
Yeah, because
I think all black people don't see it. But I get your point.
Yeah, I get the point. But I don't even think that black people even looked at it as deep at all. I really think that, you know, in the sense of it, and you guys can chime in, when I look at that proposition, it is a statewide proposition compared to Measure U being a local kind of situation. And local, you can galvanize, you can organize, and you can really atone to those folks that are on the ground that can really resonate and speak volumes, where in the reality, I saw great, organizing in Sacramento. I don't know what was going on in LA. I don't know what was going on in San Jose. And when I look at it, those markets, why would they want Proposition 10? You know what I'm saying? LA, why would they want it? I mean, they're doing well right now with it being the way it is. So I don't know. I love what you broke down, King, but I know for a fact that black people weren't looking at it like this was going to be something that's going to position us to be more gentrified. But Queen, go ahead, break it down, and then Brother Daryl, you chime in, please, as well.
So I think my fellow panelists, I'm sorry, give me
Khalil.
kind of establishes my point, because Proposition 10 didn't establish rent control. It simply removed a loophole in rent control, which is Costa-Hawkins. And I think one of the issues, Costa-Hawkins is a law that was established in 1995 that states that rent control cannot apply to single-family units or multifamily units that were built after the implementation of Costa-Hawkins, so after 1995. What Prop 10 did was allow communities to make the decision what they wanted rent control policies to apply to. So I think that, so there's two issues. So in San Francisco, the issues that Khalil were referring to were actually exacerbated by loopholes in rent control, being Costa-Hawkins and the Ellis Act. And so those loopholes are exercised to be able to push families out of the communities and to exacerbate gentrification, which is why San Francisco's prices and those Bay Area prices there's a direct correlation to that today. And so that's actually not the implementation of rent control, that's the implementation of the loopholes, which Costa-Hawkins is actually one of. And those loopholes is what disproportionately impacts communities of color, which is why neighborhoods that were predominantly black in San Francisco no longer exist. So I just want to clarify, it's even and I am in the weeds in this. Obviously, I worked very hard and played a key role in. My organization played a key role in the measure that's in Sacramento will be on the ballot in 2020. So, and intimately understanding rent control and the history of rent control, I have to kind of disagree with you, my brother.
And that's beautiful to disagree, but I mean, this is like, again, this is the reason why we're having the dialogue.
I think one of the things that we were able to do, Barry, during the discussion around Measure U, and Omega was a part of that discussion as well, was to really have this dialogue and to talk about, what do you think? This is what I think. Well, wait a minute, didn't understand that perspective, or didn't see it the way that you did. So this is what should happen around rent control come 2020. And starting next year, we really want to have these kind of discussions so that we're real clear on what 2020 will look like around rent control, the measure that Omega and her organization has pushed and successfully got on the ballot. So I think that that's part of what it is, and us not having, because Prop 10 discussion was a statewide discussion, wasn't local, so it was harder for us to have a real crisp dialogue about it. We had occasional dialogue, but Measure U was on the other hand, because it was local, it was at the top of everybody's agenda to talk about. So it gave us that ability to do that. I'm probably more along the line with saying to you that part of the challenge that Prop 10 had was that there were times people used the argument that you used, but that really wasn't what Prop 10 was trying to do. Prop 10 was just simply saying, locally, you can decide what you want to do around rent control. Your decision, not the state's decision, because right now the state has decided that there is no ability to have rent control unless you put something on the ballot locally. And that's all it's about. That's all it really was about, in my opinion, in terms of giving us the ability to have that discussion. So as we move forward, my hope is that we'll have the chance to talk about that locally. And I would keep going on the campuses, because I really think that you guys need to have these dialogue, not just in the community center where we were at our center, but really on the school campuses, and having talks about what is this about. I think one of the fresher conversations I heard about Measure U that we weren't necessarily organizing was one that was held at Sac State, and we had some of the young people who had been to the meeting where we were talking about Measure U at the university, talking about their thought. There's some things that they picked up in the
From our
conversation.
conversation that they were in, yeah.
Yeah,
We
so-
were able to break it down in a
That's it.
layman's term, and they
That's
was
it.
able to speak upon it in the way that they understood it.
And that's what we need. We need the ability to have these kind of dialogues at a bigger level, both in colleges but also in the churches. So that the church recognize you gotta have you engaged in this conversation. I think for us, whether the mayor says it or not, I think once again the black churches came out and he went to the churches and talked to them, and they gave him an opportunity to explain Measure U, because others were simply looking at it as anti-black. And he was at least able to talk from his perspective on how it benefit. Then they had the ability to pick up the phone and call Barry, myself, and others and say, wait a minute, this is what he was saying. Do you agree with that? And the respect that we have, I think, changed their opinion and gave them the ability at least to advocate from it or give folks a reminder that you got to vote. You know, and at the end of the day, locally, that's why things happen the way it did. Nationally, I just want to remind us, still dealing with numbers. And when you deal with Mississippi, when you deal with Georgia, when you deal with Florida, when you deal with Alabama, you're still dealing with numbers. And until we get young people to start recognizing that what hatred looks like, what racism looks like, that they can say, hey, this got to change. Because the number of 35% black in Mississippi still was not the number that can overcome. You had 54% of the folks who had already made up their mind, because apparently on election day, that's how it worked in Mississippi. You know, 54 to 46%. So no matter how effective he was to get black folks to vote for him, and I do believe that black folks overwhelmingly voted for Mike Epps, as they did for both the sister as well as the brother in Florida. I know they overwhelmingly, it still was a numbers game. And we still got to talk about how do we then figure out a way to also overcome those moments when our numbers don't allow us to win outright.
And I also tell people all the time, it's Georgia, not Atlanta.
Yeah.
Atlanta is the city, it's not the state. You don't get fooled when you see Atlanta. You're like, oh man, this is supposed to be an easy win. It is Georgia. Brother Jay, you've been quiet over here. Let's get you to chime in on some of your thoughts on Measure U as well as Prop 10.
Most did. I think overall, I think that this election,
Bring your mic up close, cause
okay, for sure.
You can hold it in your hand if you like it, whatever's comfortable for you.
I'm gonna scoot up a little
Okay,
closer.
thank you. Lean in.
Yeah, I think, is this a little better?
Yep, that's better.
Okay, for sure. I think overall, I think that as it pertains to black people, this election, we was fighting for crumbs. I think that we were fighting for scraps and crumbs, and I think that that's why a majority amount of black people don't believe in the political system and don't come out to vote, because the win is not a big enough win for them to feel like it's an interest for us. So I feel like that's what stops black people from voting. I feel like even if we voted yes on Prop 10 and we got Measure U, I think that with the Measure U, I think that that puts a big responsibility on us, especially the ones advocating for Measure U. Now it's really time to deliver, because that was a controversial vote. You know what I mean? And since we pushed yes on it, I think that we really have to be up in that city council's ass, I'm sorry, excuse my language, to make sure that they deliver, because a lot of people didn't believe in it. So I think that that's really my thoughts on Measure U. I was divided on it because I could hear the no side of it and I could hear the yes side of it. And I think that anyone that could push one side and not acknowledge the legitimacy of the other side has some type of agenda with them. But I acknowledge that a lot of people were saying, you know, yeah, I'm for Measure U. I hear what you're saying on the no side, but I'm rocking with this yes side. There was a couple people who was, you know, I'm not for the Measure U, but I feel some of the things that y'all saying on the yes side. That's where I was at with it. So like whether it passed or didn't pass, I was cool with it either way, because it was a hard vote. But at the end of the day, like I said, I don't think that that's going to be our salvation, you know, Measure U. I think that it will help black businesses. That's what I was interested in it about. The fact that some of this money will go into black organizations, not businesses, nonprofits and organizations to help with after school programs and things of that sort. So that's why I was like, okay, I'm cool with Measure U on that. The fact that 50% is going to police.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, you know, so it was a controversial election. And like I said, I feel like at the end of the day, overall, we were fighting for crowns. I think that what we learned from this election, what I thought would be most beneficial with this election, is that if black people, if we could get on one accord, and instead of being 60-40 on the vote, what I like most about this whole election was I think it was the sisterhood, the basically the cheat sheet, which I used to vote.
Shout out to the sister circle.
That came out from the sister circle. And I'm like, that's what we need, bro, because black people ain't gonna be going in and researching all the different types of logistics, especially when you got counter narratives coming out that's confusing what's really going on with these votes. You know what I mean? We got stuff to do. We real busy. We got families, lives, and people don't have the amount of time to really be interested in politics like that. So I think that the sister circle, when they came out with that cheat sheet, I thought that was real valuable. And what I would like to see is that we vote based off of something like that. If we all came together and say, look, no matter what we believe in, we're gonna have this board that we elect. Anyone could be on this board. We're gonna come out with this list every election period. And black people, we just vote based on the list. I would rather we had 99% of black people vote for Ann Schubert before, not this primary, but vote for Ann Schubert, vote no on Measure U, no on Prop 10, and against all of what seems to be our interests, but vote in unison, rather than us be divided 60-40 on what we feel like we need. So that's kind of like what my thoughts on it was.
Another deep breakdown.
Yeah, that was great. I think that well, I watch a lot of historical videos and lectures and whatever. I just think historically we're never gonna always be on one accord. That's like a plan for. That's like almost like a big distraction, and we'll be over here. Like we're gonna all, because no race is all. It just appears that way. It just really appears that way. I just think that what plan. It's like voting is great. I think that's a part of our civic duty. But I'm always concerned with what do we do when we're not voting? Because our ancestors made out of some horrible stuff, and half of them didn't vote. But there was something.
They couldn't vote.
Couldn't vote. Yeah,
couldn't
couldn't vote. How do we hold people accountable in the political process? Because it's hard with black folks. Because we're not like any other group. We want to act like we're just like everybody else. No, we are not. Because we don't get the same things. We just don't. And it's hard for us to have a plan. Rather, if we win or lose, we should always be working some kind of plan. And it seemed like we put all our hopes in one basket, and then the basket, we don't get the basket back, and then we over here like, that's why I don't vote. Dude, what's your other plan?
Yeah.
Right.
I got like 100 plans. So, with the go ahead, is your mic on?
Yeah, I think you got a point in terms of not only.
I got you. You turn back on, see it's on. All right, let's see if that works.
Your point is valid. That one, we can't put all our eggs, or we can't lean on one vote or one direction on any one thing. I firmly believe what you looked at in terms of Measure U was people making that decision on what was best for them in the end. And for me, it was that's why we had the dialogue, because I wanted to understand why somebody thought the way they did, because I didn't necessarily agree with that, but at least I had a better understanding. It also gave me a chance to depersonalize it, because sometimes we get to make it personal by personalities instead of understanding, look, we can just disagree with this, and tomorrow we can start moving forward. But we got to make sure we have respect when we're doing that. And there were moments that I felt like some people lost sight of that. So that made it difficult to regroup and come back and move forward. But I think the deal has to be we got to move forward. I don't agree with you on scraps, because I always think 50 million is a little bit more than scraps. But I do recognize that we're not going to get all that 50 million.
Right.
But there are strategies that we could use and that we should use and that we are trying to use. And we don't talk about all of it in public. But that some of those are things that will push the agenda in our favor around economic development, around what's happening with our young people. I can talk about publicly the SAC Kids First Coalition's push to put 2.5% of the general fund budget, set that aside for young people. As 2021, the election would be 2020, but in 2021, beginning putting 2.5% of the general fund budget, which is about $12 to $14 million, put that aside for young people and invest in their future.
And now let me say that. So now, let me just correct me if I'm wrong. Now strategize, right? Well, we're talking strategy.
Right
If
on.
we get that, right, that means that Measure U money, that is also supposed to be for the young people. Instead of that being used 2020, we could use that fund that will be allocated instead of taking that money from Measure U. Now Measure U could be more on economic development. Am I?
You do just that, because
Okay.
now you set aside 2.5% of the budget for that. See, I think strategy-wise, we have to start looking at what's available and start going after it in ways that others do it. See, you know, whether we accept it or not, the police have a strategy, and they have allies in the strategy, and the voters are the allies in the strategy, because whether we accept it or not, folks will vote for police.
Yes, they will.
And they will come out and say, I want more police in my neighborhood. That's just a strategy that people have in place, and that's how they get that agenda. That's why 60 to 70% of the city budget right now goes to fire and police, right this moment. So when you look at that and you say that, well, what's now left? Well, there's 30% of the budget that's left. We should be talking about what does that look like? Because if you're talking about a $500,000 general fund, $500 million general fund budget, you're talking about a sizable chunk of money. You're talking about $100 million that's set aside that's not designed for anything else unless you politically can figure out a way to get it. So whether that be young people, and to me that's 2.5% of the budget that I'm talking about, setting aside for young people, so that's beginning 2021, that you'd have that set aside $12 million every year to invest for the next 12 years in our young people, so we can see a result of where our investment goes to, and can begin seeing changes. To me, that's kind of the strategy. So I say, in addition to supporting a Measure U, you also come back with other strategies, so you tie down dollars. And you talk about economic development in our communities as part of that strategy as well. And how do we begin making sure that folks understand what's important to us? We have to be visible, go downtown, gotta speak not only for what we want, but demand what we expect from them. And in 2020, for those folks who can't support that now, then you unelect them. And you start looking at how do you unelect. I said, we talked about that. How many people have been unelected from the city council in the last 20 years that you all know of?
So the other thing is that I'm always interested in how do we get people like you to connect with the young folks so they understand that, or at least I think we just gotta learn how to have some skin in the game on a lot of levels. Yeah. I don't think we're gonna always be on this side. There's so many people who walk in different worlds, because like W.C. Fields used to say, I'm gonna be on either side that wins. That was a saying he used to always say during the war. Yeah. And I'm saying, and I don't think it's about a selling out thing. It's just like at the end of anything, whatever money we have, most of us use it for the people anyway. So it's like, how do we talk to young people to say, this is the stuff that worked, this is the stuff that absolutely did not work. You know what I mean? And how do we, like, for instance, I would love to see there's a lot of young people who ran for offices and got in them, including that young Latino sister out of New York. So it's kind of like, I always feel like, get the baton now. Don't tell me about, I want to really, and I'm always challenging y'all, because I think that we need y'all to step in. We know how brilliant y'all are in other parts of the game and life, but I also feel like sometimes it's okay to be like, you know, I'm just going to come on up in here and get it in. Like, you know, because I have some ideas that I want to work out. And when I look at those two props in particular, like, we know we're not hanging all our hopes on those two props.
No, absolutely not.
Some of us are, let's be honest.
You want to say something?
Turn is your mic on? Okay, good. Yeah, there you go.
Just with regards to accountability for Measure U, they did pass that ordinance, and it is open for applications. I was looking at it myself with regards to applying for the 16 to 23-year-old position.
We need you to.
Because now that, like you said, Measure U has passed, and now we are accountable for pushing Measure U for the yes. Now, with regards to the plan, I'm getting that 50, a piece of that 50 million. We need to have faces and representation, and like minds on that commission. There's 15 spaces now. They allow 9 for the city council, and then 6 additional. So that means we at least need what is that 9 to actually influence that. I'm sorry, at least 8. I'm sorry, to influence that. If we want at least a simple majority. So with that, with that being said, we need applicants who are of like minds and are of our we can't say skin colors, all kinfolk, all skin folk.
Yeah,
But,
yeah.
you know, we need like minds on there to ensure that money does, you know, go back to the black community like we wanted to ensure that we can begin that economic development. That way we have multiple, you know, sources of, not really income, but multiple streams of money flowing into the community. Whether we have a 2.5 that will come in the future, but we can ensure a piece of that pie comes to us.
Strategy.
What I was thinking about something on the terms, you know, not essentially what you wanted. Was kind of establishment and creating a framework for a community trust. Josh knows my sentiment about kind of doing a, like Elijah Muhammad said, if we contribute, what was it, like 20 cents? Just cents on the dollar, you know, every person in the black community commits to cents on the dollar to going into a fund. We could easily all eat and have our own like kind of form of generation of economic development. How that would work, essentially, you know, creating the framework for a community trust where business owners and, you know, black people in the community would put a portion of, let's say, their paycheck or wherever they're getting into a community trust that would be deliberated on by an oversight commission that we can choose of. That way we break the framework of relying on the legitimacy of the government of, you know, Sacramento City, and we kind of establish our own kind of micro government within our own thing that we can, you know, we have our own, you know, let's say it's in a bank or whatever. And we establish a framework for that trust, and we have trustees on that board, and we have a board of trustees within our own community that has the oversight for that fund. So let's say it's in Oak Park, Meadowview, South Sac, or even Del Paso Heights, and let's say we have 4 of that. We don't need one overarching one. We can have 4 different ones for each community. That way we have like our own districts within that as a board of trustees, something like that. That we don't have to rely on the legitimacy of the state government or the city government to give us that money. We develop that own kind of generation of you know, economic development.
That's that nation building.
Let's hear it for our young guy. Strategize. Let's talk strategy, people.
Yeah. And I'm with that all the way. And I think that as we build, I think that we should start relying on first building outside of dealing with the city government, have our own ideas of what we want, and then take it to the city government and push that issue. The reason why I said that I felt like we was fighting for scraps is because Measure U was not a measure that was introduced by black folks. A lot of the measures and propositions that I understand was introduced by other people who had their own agendas. And so we see where we can get in and fit in within those agendas, but it's still a reactionary action. It's still, okay, y'all trying to push this, okay, let me see how I can get in and fit in. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't do that. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that. But I'm saying that if we know that Darrell Steinberg, the mayor, was pushing this Measure U, and we know that 50% is going to go to police and fire, what's he planning to do with the other 50%? We ain't finna get the whole other 50%. We finna get a fraction of that 50%. While I think that it's important that we get a fraction of that 50% and use it constructively, we have to still realize that, bruh, we didn't push this agenda. This ain't no black power move that we made. We trying to get in and fit in and use this money to build. We trying to be strategic about it. We gotta recognize it as that, and I'm saying that that's why I feel like this election, we were fighting for scraps all across the board, because we didn't introduce not one measure, not one proposition, and we didn't have a strategy, and we were reactionary with dealing with it. And so I'm just saying that's how I see us fighting for scraps at the end of the day. I'm saying when black people, once we start to try to participate in politics, we have to come with an agenda like Bruh's saying. Like, okay, we want to get this trust, we want to get this land thing going, and we want to take it to them with this agenda and then put our foot in their behinds and make sure that they give us what we asking for. But I think that whenever we dealing with them, it's still going to be, it's not all the way what we're asking for. We're trying to fit within the confines of what they want, and we're going to get a fraction of, we're going to be able to get in where we fit in with it.
Now, a conversation, and y'all brothers are spot on, but a conversation was brought up to the mayor with a lot of black organizers, black leadership, and the actual conversation was about black economics, the build. So, in the truth of the matter, the conversation had been brought up on, we need something. You want something from us, we need something from you. So the real reality of playing this chess game and being on the board is what is told to us. I don't got nothing to give y'all but Measure U if it's passed. So the reality is, we as black people, if we all came together and said, right now black people in Sacramento want the black economic funds and we put it on the ballot, no one's voting for that. Now let's be very clear. No one is, once they see black economic fund, no, it's like, it doesn't matter if we got a whole bunch of people that signed a petition and we got it on, that's going to be a fail. But if we look at and utilize Measure U as being our black economic fund for a certain perspective of what we need to do right now, that's a different channel. So the reality is playing that game in a way where we say, well, in content, let's see what this will do, and the purpose of this will be for us to be able to get that monies without having to go through all of the red tape and all the controversy, when we should be able to say, yes, black people need it, because, I mean, look at the statistics, they'll tell you, but in our reality, living in Sacramento where they're flying Donald Trump flags, when they're yelling, make America great again, when Nazis are being able to organize downtown, and a lot of business owners are as racist as it could be, there had to be a way to where we put our needs on the table without putting it out there for those to be like, oh, well, if this is going to help black people, there's no way I'm going to vote for it. So I think the strategic part of it was, this was kind of like the only way for us to get them to put some skin in the game, because if not, they're not. That's just the bottom line. They're not going to do anything. Now, will they do something for the Black Child Legacy, a part of servicing? Because Black Child Legacy is what, 3 years, 4 years? Then it's gone, right? Of course they'll do something like that, because service provided by institutions is totally different. I'm not going to give you money for an institution that can benefit you for centuries, decades. I'll give you some money for some service programming, because guess what? We know the service is going to last for about 3, 4, 5 years, then it's gone. This is to be sustainable. Sustainability has come with that. So I disagree with the conversation, because not that many people understood the conversation that was going around, but it couldn't be said and explained or put out on Facebook, because to be honest with you, black people, when we talk about strategy, we deal with emotion more than we deal with strategy. Let's be very honest and very clear, and anything that we do, right? Because here you have people calling Negroes who's been on the front line sellouts, when we're thinking about a strategy that's going to benefit you. The reality is, what has happened as folks started seeing that black people are really building the African marketplace. You got different black businesses opening up on a grassroots level. You have nonprofits, black owned, that have sustained for more than 5 to 10 years by themselves, not with any government assistance. So it's almost kind of like, we have to do something, because now it's looking upon us that we are negating all these people that are constantly saying and knocking at the door, when is it going to be our time? When we're looking at other communities and saying, when is it going to be our time? When are you going to start putting up money to help us build economically, like you did for the Asians, like you did for the Mexicans, when we drive down Stockton Boulevard, when we drive down Franklin Boulevard? We see it, so you can't deny it. We see it. So this was our game to push. But this is not telling everybody to stop what you're doing and say, okay, we're going to make for Measure U to save us. This is saying, the building that you've been doing, we need to start building more aggressively. And now here's our opportunity to get some monies with statistics talking about how banks have done us wrong, right? Statistics talking about how black people haven't got business loans. We have all this evidence to prove, to say, hey, things ain't going the right way.
And I think one of the things, to your credit, but to your credit, you're correct. You really are, and I think there's some parts that I'd encourage you guys to think about. So there's that marijuana money that hasn't been tagged on anything yet, hasn't been, and even when it's tagged, unless it goes directly to pay for the pension challenge that's coming down the line. I think there's going to be monies like that are still there. And those are the opportunities where I think you come up with your strategies and you get prepared to make the political argument to get 5 folks to support that push. And that is using the system, but it also is directing the system in a way that you think it should go. And I think what Rolanda's mentioned is you also got to look at opportunities where you all can be elected and you all can serve and you all can get ready to take over and be in charge. Because in places where you're in charge, you're able to do those things. You're able to talk to each other about what about a community fund that is different than we've tried in the past. Well, many of us hearing you say that makes sense. So we look at the ability of us to get five folks to support that on the present city council is not going to happen. But if we start unelecting some folks and bringing some like-minded folks to the table, you really do have the opportunity to do that. So I encourage you guys to stay engaged, stay involved, challenge us, kick our asses too. Because old black folks who've been doing this a while need to be reminded there's another way to do things. And whether you realize it or not, I think we listen to you much more than you realize. Because maybe we don't say it while we're standing there, but when we leave here, there are other people who hear ideas and fresh approaches that you all have caused us to have to think about that maybe we didn't bring to the table before.
Right on. You want to say something?
Yeah, I think that all of it's right, quite frankly. I think it's about long-term strategy versus immediate strategy. I think that the idea of a community trust is amazing. I think the question for me is just timing. So I think that's it's just more of a long-term strategy. I also think that as far as all of the needs of our community, and God knows there's many, regardless of how anyone feels about rent control, housing is still an issue.
Oh, major issue.
Props 1 and 2 passed. That provides matching funds for local municipalities. And so regardless of where anyone is on the rent control issue, no one disagrees that we need more affordable housing. So what are we doing in all the things that we need to have that family meeting?
No, that's real talk.
But what are we doing to ensure that resources for affordable housing are being placed in communities that need it, communities that look like us?
Right on. I just want to add on real quick. I do think practice really helps you to understand what it's like to stand in certain shoes. That's why I keep going back to history. So if you look at anything in history, young people had to literally go to the street. Yeah. And that really did change how people were doing things up top. So there's something about when young folks get in the street, or like even in the record industry game, when young brothers were selling their own tapes out their car, that totally changed that game. So I'm saying, I think sometimes we give y'all a lot of information, a lot of education, but that ground education you can't get at school. You gotta go get that out the street. You gotta organize like a soldier. And I know y'all know that, but I just feel like there is something about when you get a whole bunch of young people together, it changes the mood. We want your attention. We need to know, how do we support you? How do I hold myself up steady so that you have a greater chance of reaching wherever we're trying to get to? I think there's a disconnect in that in our generations, in some of our generations. There's a disconnect where we don't know how to say to you, what is it that you need so you can sit on that city council seat? Because I'm not doing that. But I can see y'all doing it because you younger, you fresher, but it also gives you more experience. Like, hey, y'all, that's a beautiful idea. We may not be able to do that in this system, but you can always build, because everybody here has built their own system.
And that's kind of what I wanted to touch on. Since our last conversation, I told you, and Barry and Josh both know about my, at least political philosophy. I told you I'm a Pan-Africanist and a Garveyist. Therefore, I got my degree in international relations and economics. So I've studied how, the government is essentially, it works for private property, studying Marxism, studying, Gramsciism, studying Leninism, and all those economic discourses. I don't agree that running for office in this political structure without any economic backing, I will tell you, we'll tell you this over and over again, that running for office without any economic backing means that you are giving up liberties and having to, appeal to different people that, you wouldn't be able to run that pro-black agenda on. Like for example, you want to run that pro-black agenda while running for office.
I didn't mean that at all.
No, I'm not saying that, but I mean, I understand, but running for office and attaining that position in a system of white supremacy, a power system, like Dr. Francis Cress Welsing said, that like the system is just between capitalism and communism is like a power structure within white supremacy. Right. So essentially, let's we can take it back to the motherland with regards to land ownership. They didn't own the land that they had; they worked it, therefore they owned it. So this idea of like ownership is really like Eurocentric, an Anglo-European at mindset. So with regards to this power structure that we did not establish, I'm going through Blueprint for Black Power right now, and Dr. Amos Wilson breaks down like what they give you with regards to running for office, like some here, okay, we'll give you some form of that, some that seems like you gain some power by running for office, but essentially we run the power structure politically and we run the power structure, economically. We're in the white man's economic, structure of capitalism, whether it be communism or capitalism. We don't have any control over that. So with regards to, local politics as well as even, national politics, I had a conversation with Alan Warren on a network maybe a year and a half ago. When I asked him, like, he understands the developer, he understands gentrification and how that, affects white people. And I asked him, what can black people do, to help our situation. I forgot how the conversation went down, but essentially it went down to he has to kind of dilute his message because black people don't really support his campaign. We don't come out and vote, we don't donate. So that means he has to appeal to other types of ethnicities in his area. So that kind of is also what happens in politics.
Keyword, donate.
And also,
That's just keyword, donate.
the best nation is the donation.
Right.
But like with regards to politics, without having any economic backing, like I said last time at our last meeting, if we don't have any economic backing with regards to our communities, you have to run a platform that isn't what you really want. So essentially, let's say I do want to run for city council. However, with regards to economic backing, me understanding where am I going to get this money from, this funding from, then we're coming from people who probably won't agree just as a straight pro-black agenda. I'm pro-black as can be. I'm gonna preach garbage till I die. I'm gonna preach Malcolm X till I die. But if I'm running for office preaching Malcolm X,
but here's the thing, though. I think in strategy, though.
Put it to the head.
Yeah, but I think in strategy, though, we have a lot of groups here who preach a lot of stuff, but they are in strategy. And I think it's not this thing of I'm a Pan-Africanist and I'm a humanist at the core of who I am. So I could rock with anybody. It's not so much of what I say as what I do.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes we, as black folks, we know that our situation not like anybody else's, but we still got to figure out how do I walk in the worlds that I need to walk in. Like, for instance, when I start talking about us having more black police officers or firefighters, you be black folks be like, oh no, somebody has to police us.
Yes.
Somebody has to police us. So it came like in Africa, we didn't have police. No, in Africa there's rules you can get beat with a bamboo stick too. But we don't do that here. So I'm just saying we have to figure out, like it's like knowing some information and then knowing the information so you can play this game of chess and not try to ask somebody to come play checkers because you only know checkers. You know what I'm saying? Like I think that y'all brilliant enough to do that. Malcolm X could have sat next to Adam Clayton Powell, who could have sat next to Dr. King, who could have sat next to Noble Drew Ali. I mean, that's all of who we are in the black nation. None of us are the same, but we got to be strategic. It's like I think we need in the military arm. No, I'm not in the military arm, but we need the military arm at the table. And that's not going to be, it don't make me any less black because I don't do military. Yeah. I'm not saying I'm just saying, but I just feel like that's the part we got to. That's why we sent y'all to college. I felt that's why I sent people to college. And what help y'all out? Like
to come back with the black agenda, with a black mindset,
and work that
and work it.
Well,
and tell us what we do to help.
And there were two things additionally. What's the point of running for politics? My thing is we need to establish an economic platform first to be able to run. Additionally, what also Dr. Amos points out is that you don't really see in Congress or in these national elections any other ethnicity besides black and white, or maybe even some Hispanic, but yet they have their economic settings in their own areas. Not comparing us to them.
No,
however, at the foundation, regardless, at the foundation of every kind of political and economic thing will be industrialization and jobs. Essentially, look at what Marcus Garvey established. He didn't have that with any kind of political thing. That's all about economics. That's what I'm saying. Economics. It starts, like I said, our last live session, that economics influences politics. Yeah. So if we get our economic backing first and establish these jobs, we address unemployment, and we can take care of ourselves and practice these group economics, then we have more leverage in the political game to actually, get what we want, run these campaigns that we want without having to, dilute and change our agenda. And that's what I'm saying.
But I think we're always thinking that, and I believe that's what it is, but it's not enough of us thinking on the perspective of we have to base the things on economics. I don't even think about jobs. I'm thinking about growing businesses.
Yeah.
Entrepreneurship. Like I'm working on something with a business partner of mine, and this is going to help black economics. It's not going to say our black place, but you will know what it's going to be, right? You're going to feel that. And I think that when we become unapologetic in that manner, and when we choose not to simulate, to be able to pick up that American dream and think about this black dream, or should I say, the melanated dream of our people, of how and what it looks like, I think then we'll be ready. The one unfortunate thing that we have with the people that have took in office is, one, they have not had to deal with us because they've had not to deal with us. Because we've had elitists in the black community that I think that is more destructive than white supremacists by itself. Because they are not only the gatekeepers, but they have this elite status that they don't want their position took, right? And some folks would even say, unfortunately, Brother Roberts, and I know you as my OG, that you would be a part of some of those black elitists, right? I look at it and say, I don't really know about that, but that's what some people will challenge, because individuals that have been around for so long and have not navigated in a way for us young black men and women to be empowered in such a way to where we can take power without having to constantly beg. You know what I mean? Wow. So I think that until we really start realizing that it's not about job going, it's about business growing and how we can align ourselves economically. Because with Measure U, what I saw in that change, they didn't need just a Daryl Roberts. They needed a Barry Axius. Now, Barry Axius, I'm not a part of none of their folds. So right then and there, I saw a change and a shift and an idea, because for the first time, they started talking about black economics in a way where it was a lot different than saying, we just need a service and we'll figure it out from there. And it's like, no, we need businesses. We need to create things. We need to create things in this community that looks like that community. And that is where I really kind of was, swayed in that thought. I'd rather roll the dice being at the table to see what it looks like, because I already know how I am. As soon as it doesn't go the way I feel it's supposed to, with the soldiers I got, they already know what's going to come next. You know what I mean? Because it's not like we're going to stop building the ground that we've already built. We're going to continue to build, but then we're also going to out those folks that have sat there and told us a lie and sold us down the river.
You know, the challenge for me.
Yeah.
The challenge for me when we're having this discussion, because I'll sit here and I'll hear Barry say those things, and I really respect what you're saying. I also will tell you, but you got to recognize the era is different. So when you're coming in now and you're looking from your perspective now, I respect where you're at. But if you can't figure out, well, as Barry and I have had to go over the last 5 years, this OG employs as many black folks as anybody around town. And he didn't do it by saying, I'm employing black folks. I simply did what I knew I was supposed to do. And that becomes the moment when I have to step back and I squint a minute and I make sure I don't say anything, because it's not appropriate for me to speak when somebody's saying something I don't necessarily agree with. But I can say, but there's another side to that. And when we're sitting in the room, Barry also will tell you, has to remember that there are people who didn't understand Barry, who just as Barry had to explain to them Daryl Roberts OG, I had to explain to them Barry Axius and what he's accomplishing in his own right and who he's bringing to the table. I'll tell you, in my opinion, things changed when after Stefan was killed, that you all went into the streets and said, hell no, we ain't gonna let this happen no damn more. And whether anything happened after that or not, the mere fact that you came in the streets and on one day you shut it down, a major economic engine in this town, it said to folks, it's got to be different. And to me, that's where it is. So when you guys are saying what you're saying, I agree with you. Step out. I agree with you. Keep moving. I agree with you. Do what you know need to be done so that we can see that progress. Because the only way we're going to do it is working together. I think Rolanda mentioned the historical perspective of brothers who could have worked together, who could have improved our situation today had they worked together. I don't want us to lose that opportunity in Sacramento. I'm going to say here, we got to work together. We have the opportunity to change things. But you all have to keep pushing and saying what needs to happen, because as long as you're pushing, saying what needs to happen, it's going to work. Because in my opinion, that's why things are changing. Because again, Barry is in the room making his noise. But he also has to recognize that people who made sure that Barry needs to be in here. Because others weren't saying that before. Now we know that not only Barry, but you guys need to be there. Young sisters need to be in the room. We had a meeting initially around our Build Black Coalition where it really wasn't comfortable. And we had to talk about, well, wait a minute, everybody should be in the room. And everybody should be talking and given an opportunity not only to speak, but their ideas should be accepted as valid. And we move from there. We don't have to agree on everything.
That's
So,
real talk.
in my opinion, we really are at that point now. So it's time now. We're talking what's on the table. We say Measure U resources on the table. It's general fund dollars, so we can stop calling Measure U. It's general fund dollars. Let's talk about what the general fund is available to us and go after what's there with ideas. And with ideas that not only make sense for us, but make sense to others because it has some data and it has some results that make sense.
Mm-hmm. I think that's solid. I think that we definitely need to put our foot in the game and start pushing some lines. I just think that at the same time, we do got to recognize who pushed the agenda, which was the mayor, right? And when he came to Sacramento City College and he pushed for Measure U, he said that his reason for pushing for Measure U was a boy named Devontae that he met, a black boy that was at his school and he was suffering, he was homeless, all this the black sad story, the sob story. And he said that his solution for it was to create big business and bring big business to Sacramento so that they can hire people like Devontae and give them jobs. And from what I understand, that's a big part of the mayor's plan with the Measure U dollars is to bring big business to Sacramento and bring corporations and stuff and try to give black people jobs through that. So I think that we also got to acknowledge that. And at the same time, when we're talking about Stephon Clark was the reason why the city got tore up and the reason why the city should be listening to us now, we got to recognize that the mayor said that he didn't doubt the police officers 1 minute when that happened. So I'm just saying that we definitely got to be strategic within it, but we got to know that they are pushing a line. I don't think that it's a sympathy Measure U with sympathy dollars for the black community. I think that they got their own agenda that they pushing, and they're like, if you got an agenda, you may be able to get in where you fit in. But when we advocated for them to have that committee, that thing that they just said that, y'all can come up here and we'll see, put your voices in on how we spend this money. There was committees that got formed before that advocated for them, a 12-person committee that specified on these issues, and they wasn't with it. And so it's like we still got to go into the game knowing that be strategic, what we saying. Be all the way strategic with it. Know what line they pushing and know what line we pushing.
So what would you propose? I agree with everything you just said. But historically, it's always been that. That's why you got to know history.
Yeah.
Because this man, as he's writing something to give you something, he's writing 20 things to take it back. Let's just be honest.
Right.
If you could ask the Native Americans, he made 500 treaties with them and didn't honor one.
Right.
But as a man and as a human being and as an educated person, because you go to school for that, what would you propose that we could do to get ourselves into a better position? Because at the end of the day, that's what our ancestors did.
Right.
They have half the tools we got right in this moment.
Right. I think that I agree with what you were saying in terms of going to the streets and trying to figure out a way culturally to unite ourselves. And though I understand that it's a big task to try to get black people on one mind and one state about something, I think that it has been done in the past. The majority of black people have been on one side of the fence about things while it has been divisive. But I think that we definitely need to start focusing on doing for self first. And then we need to figure out what that is. I don't know what that looks like. I'm going to be 100 with you. I think that it's going to have to take some real type of organizing. You got to figure out
Go ahead.
what appeals to black people. You know what I mean? What do black people value? What types of organizations, what types of movements got black people energized and committed to things? Things like the Black Panthers, the things like Nation Islam, SNCC, the things like Martin Luther King. What types of things did they have that galvanize black people and organize them in a fast-paced fashion? And once you understand what that is and you can create that type of movement, then you have the numbers of people where you can go into politics and push a line. But first, before we go into politics, I agree that we need to get our economics right. And I think that while some people critique capitalism and think that, like a lot of times I see that we'll be building on some black stuff, we'll be support black businesses and stuff, and then you'll get people come out and be like, well, that's capitalism, and black capitalism ain't gonna solve our problems. I'm like, well, how much money did you spend last week? Did you shop anywhere? You know what I mean? So I feel like we definitely need to galvanize ourselves, figure out what it's gonna take to galvanize the majority of black people. What do we like? What are we interested in? What is our culture? And transform that into some type of economics. And really, I feel like we have it already. I feel like we need to apply pressure to the black people who have economics, and we spend these economics outside of our community. I'm talking about our millionaires. I'm talking about our athletes, our celebrities. I'm talking about every black affluential person that we have. We need to figure out how to galvanize them and unite them amongst this, around this cause, around this black politics.
Yeah.
I think that we need our own party.
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to politics, there needs to be a party that comes out and says that this is what black people want, or this is what people, you can say this is what people of color want, but it gotta have a black-centered agenda at the same time.
But all people of color ain't the same.
Yeah,
Right.
the
That's a
melanated
trick,
agenda.
too. That's a
But
trick.
that's something that we've also been trying to push. Now that's the attitude and mindset that we have to go through in the next phase of being political. Because I didn't scratch in Democrat nor Republican. To be honest with you, I said black politics. So black politician, black party. And another thing, be very, very clear. I do not trust Darrell Steinberg as far as I can throw him. I don't trust him. I don't believe the hype. I feel like some of the messaging he did was horrible in a way that it not only put the people that was going to try to push what we were trying to get through, it almost kind of figured into the mindset of that again. I want to tap into the emotional side of black people because that's what happens, right? I'm just going to tap into this story, talk about this kid named, what's his name again? Devontae, right? And kind of bring up this happy-go story and say, stronger with you. Like, I'm not going for that because guess what? In 2016, and I've said it numerous times, I sat there and I asked him before he got elected, so what are you going to do when you get into office about black economics? Black economics. So in 2018, us being at a round table, I brought that same conversation. And him having to look at me as I said, we do not want the crumbs on the table, we want the whole pie. So trust and believe that these folks know that we mean business because it's a different frame. And as Brother Robert said, it's a different time now. But what we do now, we must execute in such a way where it will push back even those who are telling us to do it the same way. We're going to push back because I believe a lot of us younger folks have been building in such a way where we haven't had older folks chiming in on that, helping build or telling us this is the way we're supposed to do. We just did it. And I think that if we keep that attitude, I think we're going to progress a lot further along the way because what I do know is that these political folks know that it's just not talking to the Negro elite or talking to the gatekeepers or talking to those individuals that they've had relationships with. I got to talk to a whole different field of black people. That one church I go to every time to get all the black votes ain't the church no more because black people ain't even going to the church. I got to come outside and tell and ask black people what do we need. But again, this doesn't come to the point of asking and begging because if we're talking about truly being independent, we must grow as independent thinkers. And my attitude with independent thinking is we must navigate in such a way where we're having more of these discussions, where we're throwing things at each other, where we're kind of spitting fire at each other just to get out what is actually going to be our black agenda. And we don't all have to agree on it, but we all have to understand that a black agenda with a majority, because it ain't going to be all of us, but a majority of us moving forward is going to help us gain what we need. And until we get to that part, I think that it's just throwing caution in the wind right now.
Well, let's get the final thoughts, and we are already at the 60-minute mark. So I want to get y'all's final thought on where do you think we should go from here? I'm going to pass. We'll use those two mics for now, but they ain't giving no feedback.
I can start then.
Go ahead.
I think going from here, I think we need to realize what our political goals are. I think as a collective, we don't understand what our political goals are. You know what I mean? Like if you ask the average black person, politically, if you can get anything you want from politics right now, what do you want? I don't think we have an idea of what we want. I think that some people say reparations and some people be like, we don't need reparations. That was a long time ago. I didn't work this land. You know what I mean? I think that, criminal justice reform, the justice system reform, some people will say that, but what are we specifically talking about when we say that? What type of reform do you want? So I think the idea of what we even want out of politics has not been formatted. We don't understand what that is yet. So I think we need to take a step back, assess what our position is in America, and assess what we want from America, and then come up with that politics. And then once we come up with that politics, everybody got to be on code with that politics. It can't be divisive with 50% saying yeah, 50% saying no. And if it is, we need to figure out how to make that other 50% go over to make our percent stronger to 80%, 90%. That's what it's gonna take if it's a democracy. Otherwise, it's what? What are we doing? We pushing lines on people. We beating people up to make them vote.
You talking about the democracy?
Yeah.
You know what that word means?
I've heard different things
democracy. Let's look it up. It's Greek.
Most deaf.
Bam, right over here.
Gotcha.
My thoughts on how we need to proceed is kind of a sort of nation building within our own communities. You know, we are fragmented politically, you know, philosophically. We have black conservatives. We have black people for Trump. But even economically, we do need to be a little conservative. While it's morally, we do need to be a little, you know, liberal with regards to how we handle things. So it's kind of, we need to, like, we are fragmented in the black community, but those who are like-minded, you know, we need to make that push, you know. There was a quote that I posted, I forgot, it was a while ago. It said, not all black people are going to stick together, but those who do are going to build the future.
That's what's up.
So, you know, we kind of get that nation building, that begins economically with our base, you know. I think Garvey did have, you know, he had a great mindset with regards to economics, you know, the creation of the UNIAA, and providing jobs. You know, we do need those entrepreneurs, you know, we said, but we also need jobs. Unemployment of Park still at 30%. Not all of them need to be entrepreneurs. We need jobs. We need that economic, you know, that revenue going to them. So the UNIAA did not just was not only an entrepreneurship, but it was also provided jobs for black people.
Yes, it is.
And that's something that we do largely need is jobs. So kind of that nation building mindset, that, you know, that ownership kind of mindset, you know, Josh said we do need to kind of engage in capitalism. After reading The Miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, socialism isn't really the way, essentially, because socialism, you know, with its redistributive mindset, and kind of the spreading of wealth, we actually need to kind of gain some wealth first and then do that. Let's say if we switch to a socialist kind of